Hello folks, okay, here today doing a video. Just wanted to point out some of the things that I think are somewhat odd about the blood in the RAV4. Not without testing, just the things that stand out to me as seeming odd about the blood in the RAV4. So what we got here is a few pictures here that have spots where there is blood in the RAV4. Right there we're looking at the touch blood leavings that were left on the CD case, that were actually left by, being like blood being on a surface and being brushed against it. Then you move over here to where it's in the door, or the bottom of the doorway, there, and you can see there's two spots. One of them is kind of a longer, like a run, and one of them is just like a drop, and we'll talk about those in a minute. And then we'll move down here to the one that everybody pretty much knows, the little squiggle by the ignition. And what I also find interesting is nothing on the shifter. I'm gonna get to that a little bit later. Why I find that particularly interesting. I'm gonna show you why I think it's interesting. But yeah, this is the one we all know. And supposedly all of this came from this little cut on Steven's finger, which I will point out to you, if you look there, is all the way at the end of his finger, almost pretty much at the last knuckle, just near the last knuckle on his middle finger there, on the pinky side. On the pinky side of his finger. So just to make that clear. So now we'll go ahead and we'll now move into the first part about the little squiggle by the ignition. Okay, so here we are with obviously the most infamous blood in the RAV4 from MAM that everybody knows about, that was very talked about. Many people believe that this was left by a Q-tip. It looks very much like somebody just took a Q-tip and kind of squiggled on this area. What I would point out here is a couple things. Number one, that the ignition area, where the ignition is, there, sticks out further. That's actually closer to the camera. And if the blood was near the end of his middle finger, as I was saying, near the last knuckle, the blood would have been left around that rim of the ignition there, because that area where the blood is at, you can tell, is sunken back. It's just sunken way back. So it's just strange that blood got left there and not where the arrow is right now. So that's where the blood would most likely have ended up being, that it was at the end of his finger at where the key would be. So that's what I find out about this. And then also, when you look down at that shifter there, is the other thing that I would point out. There's no anything on that shifter at all. I'm just pointing that out now because I'm going to show you something else right now where you're going to see, in a different situation, why I am finding it odd that there is no blood there on that shifter. So we'll show you that now. Okay, so here we have the Grand Am. And if you look here, number one, there's two drops down there on the shifter panel there, but where the arrow is now, there's a bit of blood, bit of red, which I think is blood. And I think this is the actual place where Steven cut his finger and where Steven was actually driving. And I think this is the car that Steven was bleeding in. We all know that Brendan said that Steven originally was trying to pry something and cut his finger. Well, amongst other stories that he ended up telling about the cut. But that one seems to ring true when you look at this and you see those two drops down there. Now I'm going to show you the two drops a little closer up. Okay, so now we're going to take a little bit closer look at these drops. Now, this is down from where the blood was up on the shifter, but I wanted to take a closer look at these drops. You can clearly see there's definitely red to that drop, just like there's red to the drop up on the shifter, or the whatever's up on the shifter. Now this other drop here, I can't be 100% certain because it falls on that like brush material where the shifter is. It's a little bit harder to discern, but it looks about the same size as the other drop. So I think to use the word they like in court, to a reasonable degree of scientific certainty, we can say that that's probably a blood drop just like that one there. And that's interesting because he was dripping blood here. Alright, so this is the cut on Steven's finger that we're talking about. Now, I know some will make the argument, well, maybe he did bleed in the Grand Am, and maybe in tussling with Teresa, it got reopened. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and roll with that theory. Okay, so if it was bleeding like it was, if it was reopened and therefore bleeding like it was before, we're not seeing any blood here on the shifter, which I find odd. But, and the reason why I suggest that it was bleeding as before, because I believe it would have been if that in fact was true, is this. These two drops here, very consecutive, very close together, very similar to the two drops in the Grand Am. And this is why I say if this was Stephen Avery bleeding, and if it was his cut reopened, as maybe somebody would suggest, then it certainly was bleeding as it was before. Thing is, why is the blood not ending up where it should be? If he's bleeding this much, why is it not ending up over in the driver's seat or by the in the proper places by the ignition? Because that's where he was driving the car. And, you know, if you look at this stain, you can see it was enough blood that dripped that it ran a little bit there. And you can see where as it dried up, the cellular material kind of condensed down at the bottom there where it's darker. And then you got that other one up there where it basically didn't really run much because that plastic surface area there on the inside is rougher. And so it just kind of just hit there and stuck. But that run, you can see it was enough that it actually kind of ran maybe half an inch or so. And like I said, you got that dark kind of spot down at the bottom where basically the cellular material had condensed when it was drying up. So, this is why I can say that, yes, if in fact it was Stephen's cut reopened, it certainly was bleeding like it was in the Grand Am. So, that's why I make that, deduction. Okay, and now that leaves us with the touch bloodstains on the CD case. These are quite interesting to me. If Stephen was bleeding, and he was bleeding enough that it was dripping, how does he leave a touch bloodstain here and not leave any sign of a fingerprint? Because, you don't only just have fingerprints at the end or the tip of your finger. You look at your finger and you can see there's definition pretty much all up and down it and around on the sides and stuff. How is there no indication of any kind of fingerprint there? Well, I believe it's because it wasn't him actively bleeding. It was somebody planting it who rubbed it there, and whoever rubbed it there had gloves on that didn't leave any marks of a fingerprint of any sort. So that's what I find interesting about this particular stain. And so now, on top of all the other things that I've pointed out here that I feel are fishy, that just kind of don't line up, we're going to talk about these two spots here on the back of the RAV4 where blood appeared at the crime lab. There was 2 samples taken off of the tailgate of the RAV4 that were tested. Both came back inconclusive. There wasn't enough material for them to generate a profile. In court, Sherry Culhane tells Jerry Buting that they were not Stephen Avery. The funny thing is, Kratz asserts at the beginning of trial in his PowerPoint presentation that the blood is Stephen Avery's. A bald-faced lie. So what we've got is we've got no Stephen Avery fingerprints anywhere in the car to be found. All we have is this blood that we only find on the passenger area, where the passenger seat is and the passenger door is, and then the little squiggle by the ignition. And like I say, it's odd, particularly the touch stain on the CD case, but it's just very strange, especially if we go with the theory that, okay, yeah, Stephen, the cut was reopened when he was struggling with Teresa or whatever. Okay, so then let's say that was the true. Then why is there no blood on the shifter or in that area like there should be? I mean, it's just The blood isn't in the places where it should be. And then you add to that things like Kratz lying about the results from the blood on the tailgate. I mean, why do you do that? If your case is legitimate and speaks for itself, so, why do you need to do things like that and lie and say that blood was traced back to Stephen when it wasn't? So it's just the whole accumulation of things that just are off when it comes to this blood and when it comes to a lot of the evidence with this case. So that's about it for this video, folks. If you want to know more about the Ken Kratz claiming the blood on the tailgate with Stevens and the testimony of Sherry Culhane, I will leave the link for my video, Beware the Lies of Ken Kratz, in the information below. So feel free to check that out. And if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Have a nice day.